really excited to go through this book with you. A lot of stories in this book, so it's more of a narrative about different things that happen in the life of Esther. Why preach on Esther? Why this random book in the middle of the Old Testament? Well, I think that there's a verse in there that sums up the whole thing, and that is that when it's said to Esther that who knows if you were not born for such a time as this. And what I hope that happens as we come to the end of this study is that every one of you in this room would come to understand that your life is significant and your life has meaning, and you are exactly where you are and in the places that you are for a reason, that God placed you there and has allowed things to work out in your life that they have worked out in His bigger plan. So I can go through my life and I can think my life doesn't have any meaning or purpose and that I'm just waiting from the cradle to the grave, or I can look at my life as I am here in this moment at this time for this reason because God has something He wants me to do. And that's really what I want for all of us as we kind of study through this. And there's a lot of great lessons in here, but that's the big overarching theme when we think about the book of Esther, is that God placed these people in these positions at this time. Today, though, I want to talk to you about that. We're going to cover the whole first chapter. So buckle up. We got to get through 20-some verses in about 34 minutes. So 22 verses in 34 minutes. So let's just read the chapter, and then I'd like to come back and give you some things to think about as you leave. So we're going to start in Esther 1:1. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. So if you understand world history, you'll know that the first great world empire was the Babylonian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar is the one that came and took Jerusalem and took a lot of people as slaves back to Babylon with him. But that was that great first world empire is the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire then was conquered by the Persian Empire. Media-Persia Empire became the second great world power. Then the third great world power was the Greece, Alexander the Great. You had that Grecian Empire, and then that was conquered by the Romans. And then we just kind of had a hodgepodge. Then we not necessarily since the Roman Empire, it's been, just a bunch of nations kind of. Not necessarily one great world leader. But at the time, in this particular time, you have Babylon first, then Persia. This is the area that we're in, is in the Persian Empire. So Darius was the first he was one that really spurred this conquer of Babylon. And then he had a son, and his son was named Xerxes. So when it says Ahasuerus, in the days of Ahasuerus, he's talking about Xerxes, which was another name. He had multiple names, and this is who he's talking about here, Xerxes. So he reigns from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. So he was what we would look at and say, he's got a lot. He's got a lot. He's over a lot. He's a very powerful man, very rich man. And so we're introduced to him in this first verse, okay? Then verse 2, it says, in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the third year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. So what he does is, for 6 months, he shows off all that he has. Now, this is a come and go thing. So it's not they didn't have a party for 180 days. They did have a party for 180 days, but people would come from all over these 127 provinces to see what all that Persia had, in particular in the city of Susa. So he's really showing off his palace. He does not struggle with ego. In fact, if you read a lot about Xerxes, you'll find that he called himself the King of Kings, is what he referred to himself as. Like he thought a lot of himself. And so he takes 180 days, 6 months, to kind of show off his kingdom and all of his wealth and all that he has. It says, and when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both small and great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the gardens of the king's palace. So you have this 180-day feast, the 6-month feast, followed by a 7-month feast, or a 7-month party. 7 months, 7-day party. Okay? What is that for? Well, if you put on something that lasts 6 months, there's a lot of people got to do a lot of work to make that thing go. So what he does for the next 7 days is, I'm going to have a party exclusively for all of those who've helped me the last 6 months. So that's why it says great and small. So if you were a gatekeeper and you hold the door open for people, you were a tour guide and showed people around, this party's for you. That's the 7-day one, all right? He says, and it just kind of gives you some idea of how extravagant he was. It says in verse 6, there were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods, and marble pillars, also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Verse 7, drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds. The royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king, and drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion. Can I explain that to you in 2023 terms? The bar is open, and the king's paying the tab. So basically, you're having a 7-day party with unlimited drink. You're on a cruise ship, and you can drink whatever you want, as much as you want. That's what the king's done. For all you've done for me, this is what I want to do for you. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. So the women are having their own party while King Ahasuerus or Xerxes is having his party. Then we come to the 7th day. So this is the last day of the feast. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded these 7 guys here whose names I struggle to pronounce, who you would never name your kids these names. Anyway, these 7 eunuchs, I'm just being honest. Like, I practiced them, but I'm up here now, and I'm like, I'm not even going to try it. Somebody said when you come to words in the Bible that you don't know the meaning of, most people don't know them either, so just fake it. I'm not going to fake it. I'm just going to. I thought it would get more of a laugh, but it didn't laugh. Didn't get a laugh at all. All right. The 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus. So he calls these 7 eunuchs or 7 assistants that he has to bring Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. There's a lot of debate about verse 11, especially amongst Jewish commentators. One is obviously the belief that he wants her to just come out there and parade herself for the sake of showing off her body. There's some who believe that what the king is saying here is, I want Vashti to come out with her crown on, but nothing else. He's very, very intoxicated. So that's really there's a lot of debate. Either way, he doesn't want to bring her out there for any other reason but to just kind of show her off and show off her body. Well, Vashti does a good thing here, verse 12. But Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged and his anger burned within him. So we got a guy with a huge ego who is now intoxicated, and then Vashti tells him no, he loses his mind. Has this not been a recipe for disaster since the beginning of mankind? Huge ego, uncontrolled alcohol, a temper that's out of control, does not equal good things gonna follow. So he is mad, man. How dare she not tell me no? Nobody tells me no. I'm the King of Kings. So it says in verse 13, then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment, the men next to him being those 7 guys again, who saw the king's face and sat in his kingdom, according to the law which is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she had not performed the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs. Now, one of the things you got to understand about the Persians, and we'll get clarity on this as we go through this book, is that they were people that they believed in the law and they kept the law no matter what. So like in our culture, we're a little bit flimsy with the law, right? Did everybody drive the exact speed limit here to church today? But I guess some of you probably drove under because I've gotten behind you before. Right? Most of you, though, probably did not drive the speed limit. Like I've told you about with the FedEx job, like they have cameras in our trucks now. They have cameras that are on me and that are on the front. And they rate us. They give us how we drive. And then they put the top people in the plant. Every week they're at the top of the list. I've never made that list at any point. I'm getting corrected, actually. Because do you know, like in a parking lot, I'm supposed to drive like 15 miles an hour. Have you ever tried to drive 15 miles an hour? It's very difficult. So every time I go 16 miles an hour, I'm breaking the law, and I'm getting dinged for it. Ding, 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 ding. So it's just like ding, 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 ding. It's just my camera's going off all the time. Slow down, slow down, slow down. But I just ignore it. Because we're loose with the law, right? We all are. We're loose with the law. Now, they're not loose with the law. They ain't loose with the law. If the law says it, then they're going to do it. So he wants to know, okay, this queen told me no, according to the law, what can be done to her? Verse 15, according to the law which is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she has not performed the command of the king Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs. Then Memucan said in the presence of the kings and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. Now, I don't know this Memucan guy, but he obviously had a horrible home life. Because he's like, look, we got to nip this in the bud, to quote Barney Fife. We got to nip this in the bud, man. And if people hear about Vashti and then she told you no, then it's going to be all the women in the region are going to be the same way. So we got to make an example of her. Okay, now these are drunk men trying to come to a logical conclusion. It ain't going to happen, right? Don't reason with a drunk. They're drunk. And they'll probably forget they even had the conversation in the morning. But they're trying to come up with all this stuff, and these men, I think, are taking advantage of the situation, because if you read ahead a little bit, you're going to find out that King Ahasuerus comes to regret the decision that he's about to make. Now, what was going on? What's the play here? Well, you see the hand of God behind it in a sense, because he's got to get Esther in this position of power to protect the people of God that Haman wants to eliminate. So God takes a very negative thing, but works it for his good. And that's why I believe one of the reasons why this book's in the Bible. So verse 19 says, if it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the law of the Persians and Medes, so that it may not be repealed. So we want this veto proof. We want this, there's no way they can overturn this. And what's the rule they want to make? That Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike, This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in his own script, and to every people in his own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of the people. So basically, they've got a very complicated system where they send out all of these messengers to all, kind of like our Pony Express, where years ago when they would send these messengers out and they want everybody to know that this is now the law of the land. And the law of the land is Vashti has been removed as queen because she dared to question the king. Which leads us to our outline today. And I've entitled the message today, Rethinking Wealth. Rethinking wealth. In this story, in particular in chapter 1, you have two main characters. One is Ahasuerus, who is Xerxes, the king. The other is the queen, Vashti. From the outside, we would look at Xerxes and say, wealthy man, powerful man. And he wielded his power here. But I want to talk particularly about wealth. We would see him as wealthy. If I was to ask most people, if we were to go out on the street and we were to stop people and then they would actually speak to you and say, when you think of a person as being wealthy, what would you define that as? Well, I think that most people in our culture, they would point to a person that has a lot of money. So you would say, well, this person's wealthy because of the house they live in, because of the stocks that they own, because of the possessions that they have, because of the land that they own. You know, you've heard people say, well, this is a wealthy farmer. He has thousands of acres. This is a wealthy person because they have thousands of stocks. This is a wealthy individual. It's all material. That's what we associate wealth with. But the Bible is pretty clear that wealth is so much more than just the amount of money or possessions that you have. And that's the case that I want to make for you today, is that we look at Ahasuerus and we see the wealth that he has. I mean, if it takes you 6 months to show off all your stuff, you're pretty wealthy. That's a lot of wealth. So we look at him as wealthy, but is he really wealthy? And I say no. And I want to give you 5 things today to think about when it comes to wealth. Number 1, a person is poor who must flaunt his wealth. A person is poor who must flaunt his wealth. He showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. There is something in us as human beings that I believe it's our sin nature, but there's something in us that once we get an abundance of things, we want to show it off. Like, you know, somebody gets married or somebody gets engaged and you look at the ring and, you know, the guys feel this pressure to buy this really big ring because if it's a little one, you know, I mean, you want to show it off. Like, look at this ring. My wife's wedding ring was her grandmother's. That's how cheap I am. But the point is that we get a lot of stuff and we feel this desire to flaunt it. You know, when I was a young pastor, I really wanted to learn from other pastors and what I viewed as successful pastors. And a lot of time, you know, the things that we see, it's kind of like how we define wealth, how we define success. The same way that we look at wealth, we look at it incorrectly, we look at success incorrectly. So we think that the people that we should learn from are the people that have the big churches. Because obviously they're big, so it means that there's something that they're doing something right. So I would go to these conferences and I would try to learn from these big pastors and pastored large churches. And I remember one time sitting in a conference and this guy was talking about how, yeah, man, we got so many people coming, we had to set up 500 extra chairs. And I remember this just kind of like at the time, we're running about 50. And there's more people in the bathrooms at any moment in his church than attend the church that I pastor. And it really turned me off because it was kind of like, why do you have to tell me that? Why do you have to say, look, we just put 500 chairs out on accident and they filled up. We got so many people coming, we don't even know what to do. There's a guy that I learned a lot from as a young pastor. And recently I saw a video of him, and he's kind of showing off his library. It's bigger than my house. And I remember thinking, why? What is the purpose of this? You sold a lot of books, you pastored a big church. Look at my library, look at all that all of that I have accomplished. Why do we do that? Are you really rich if you have a lot and you got to flaunt it in front of people? I would argue that you're poor. Now let me say this. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of money. There's nothing in the Bible that says anything. One of the most misquoted verses in the Bible, in fact, is the Bible does not say that money is the root of all evil. It says the love of it is the root of all evil. So you got a lot of money, God bless you. You know what that says to me? It says that God believes that he can trust you with it. So he lets you have a lot because he believes he can trust you with it. And not only that, but he wants you to use it for good. This is what Paul wrote to Timothy. He says, charge those that are rich in this present age to not be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous, ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Xerxes, as wealthy as he was materially, was a very poor man because he had to flaunt his wealth. Number two, a person is poor who has no self-control. So a person is poor must flaunt his wealth. Two, a person is poor who has no self-control. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, at this the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. One of the problems sometimes with wealthy people is they think that they can buy things. So I can buy this, but things that matter, you can't buy. You cannot buy self-control. Impossible. You can't do it. You can't buy peace. You can't buy joy. You can buy things that make you happy for about 10 minutes. But you can't buy joy. You can't buy something that really, you're wealthy based upon what you have that nobody can take away from you. Okay? Xerxes has no self-control. He doesn't know when to stop drinking, and he can't control his temper. Is he wealthy? I don't think so. Proverbs says a man of quick temper acts foolishly. Proverbs 16:32 says, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Proverbs 23 says, be not among drunkards or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. So you can have all the money in the world, but if you can't control your temper and if you can't put down the alcohol, you're a poor man. You're not rich. And that's why there's things that money cannot buy, but Jesus can give you. That the Spirit can empower you. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, goodness, gentleness, faith. These come from the Holy Spirit. There's nothing you can do on this planet to get that stuff. You can't go to some store and say, I want to buy faith. I want to buy trust. No, that comes from God. And a man who spends his life trying to do that, he's a poor man. And he will blow all his money trying to find it, but he will never find it. That's Xerxes. And you're going to see through this book, this guy has a temper problem, and he never gets control of it. A person is poor who has no self-control. Number 3, a person is poor who has counselors that won't tell him the truth. A person is poor who has counselors that won't tell him the truth. Boy, if there's anybody on the planet that needed somebody to say to him, let's give this 24 hours. And that's what, if you talk to people that are very, very wealthy, one of the things they say is, I don't know who my friends are. And the reason why they say that is because they pay a lot of people a lot of money. They're not sure. Because when you get somebody who your paycheck is dependent on, it gets a little sketchy to start spitting out truth. But don't we all need somebody to be spitting out truth to us? Because we all have blinders. Everybody in this room has something that we're blinded to, that we can't see. And we get in the moment, we get emotional, and we want to do this. And if you're in the position of power, you need to have people who will come up to you and go, look, man, I think you need to give this some time. Now, I don't want to be too hard on these guys because they may die if they say that. Like if I thought telling you the truth would mean that you would kill me, I don't know. I give it a little thought, right? So I understand. I'm not trying to be too harsh, but I'm just saying, if all I'm surrounded with in my life is yes men, I'm a poor man. But if I have people in my life who say, I think that's a bad idea, then that's good for me because it helps me see the truth. Y'all with me this morning? I'm almost done. Y'all with me? So, a wealthy man, we look at wealth as money. We would look at Xerxes and say, man, he's wealthy. But in reality, he was poor because a person is poor has to flaunt his wealth. A person that's poor has no self-control. A person that's poor doesn't have people around him who will tell him the truth. Now let's look at Vashti. And Vashti, to me, is the hero of the first chapter. I mean, Jesus is obviously the hero, but man, she's the hero here in the sense that I almost titled the message, Be Vashti. Because she defines what wealth looks like. So as Xerxes, who is in power, has all the money, he's the one we would say is wealthy, but when we look at the scriptures, we see that, well, he was really the poor one. Vashti lost everything, but she was the rich one. Because why? A person is rich who stands for truth. A person is rich who stands for truth. What you're asking me to do is wrong. That's what she says. I'm not going to come out there naked. I'm not going to flaunt just because you tell me to do so. She stood for the truth. You know, I said earlier that wealth is a word that we get all mixed up to. Can I tell you another word we get all mixed up? Beauty. You know what the word Vashti means? Beautiful woman. So when we hear that, what do we think of immediately? She was a 10 physically. But there's so much more to a woman than her physical beauty. This is why I try to counsel young men all the time. It's like, guys, don't just pick a woman because she's the hottest one in the room. But guys are just, oh, she's so beautiful. But how is she relationally? You know, there's more to a person than the physical. There's the emotional and there's the spiritual. How's she in those? Is she beautiful there? You know what I think Vashti is? I think she's a beautiful woman. Not because she's physically beautiful, but because she's a woman who stood for truth. That's what made her beautiful. That's what beauty is. You know what the Bible says about Jesus? That he wasn't really all that good looking. He was really common. Like you'd walk by him and not even notice him. But has there been a more beautiful human being that's ever walked the face of the earth? No way, not even close. Because we get beauty mixed up. So, what are you telling me, Pastor Mark? Go find the ugliest person in the world and date him? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that don't make your gauge for picking out your next mate by how hot they are, just on the outside. Because ladies, let me tell you something. He don't look that hot when he won't work. He can be Fabio laying on the couch, but if you're wondering where the bills are going to get paid, not so hot. Sorry. We got to wrap this up. Number 5. A person is rich who loses everything but keeps their integrity. A person is rich who loses everything but keeps their integrity. Why do we love movies so much? We love movies so much because most of the time the hero wins, doesn't it? Like that's why we like to go to them. We like it when the superhero wins. If they had a bunch of movies where the superhero got whacked every time and the bad guy won, we'd stop going. Because there's something in us that we love that. One of the things I'm grateful for in the Bible is that it tells us the truth. And sometimes we perceive that the hero doesn't win in the Bible. And the hero doesn't win here. Vashti did what was right, and it cost her everything. She was removed as queen. We never read about her again. We do not know what happened to her, but we do know that the law of the Medes and Persians was sound, and so she was removed from the palace, so she went from this life of great luxury to who knows what. We don't know. It's total speculation. But she lost everything. But she kept her integrity. Jim Elliot, who was a missionary who lost his life, has a powerful statement. He said this before he died. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And I used to have that quote actually up in my room at my house. Somebody bought me a little picture with that quote on there. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Can I read some scripture to tell you? Proverbs 19:1, better is a poor person who walks in his integrity than one who is crooked in speech and is a fool. Proverbs 28:6, better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways. Proverbs 22:1, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver and gold. There are things that are much more valuable than money, and they are worth living for. You know, the 12 disciples of Jesus, obviously Judas betrayed Jesus and then went and killed himself. But the 11 other guys, you know that when you look at it from a physical perspective, a material perspective, they struggled, right? They gave, you know, in the case of Peter and Andrew, his brother, they walked away from lucrative jobs as fishermen to follow Jesus. They did it for 3.5 years. They were constantly being thrown in and out of jail. They were persecuted for their stand for Christ. And all of them died martyrs' deaths. But did they have a rich life? Oh, my goodness. They had an incredible life. They walked with the Son of God for 3.5 years on this earth, and they were taught directly by him. They were in the upper room when the Holy Spirit descended on all of those in that room. Peter preached and 3,000 people got saved. They died martyrs' deaths, but they lived incredibly rich lives. It's not about how much money you got. Stop making that the everything of your life. A person who's rich, who loses everything but keeps their integrity. So you know what? You may stand for what's right, and it may cost you your job, but you still have your integrity. You can hold your head high. It is worth it. And this was Vashti. This was this woman who I do not know, and I would say she's probably not even saved, but lived a life of integrity. We have a God, the Bible says, who saw our poverty. And he, in his riches, the riches of heaven, saw our poverty, humbled himself and became poor like us. Humbled himself and walked on this earth and gave himself as a sacrifice so that our sin could be dealt with God. He made himself poor so that we might be rich. Jesus, who never owned a home, who never owned a spot of land, who was really walked from place to place, lived in people's house. Jesus was the richest of all and became poor so that we might be rich. Are you rich today? I'm not talking about your money. Are you rich today? If you have Jesus, you're rich. Do you believe it? I pray you do. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.